One of the most important influences on my spiritual life has been my family, my parents, but also by extension, the teacher of my parents, and that primarily was somebody who I also merited to study with, Rabbi Yosef Dov Soloveitchik. And as much as he impacted my life generally, when it comes to the days Rosh Hashanah and especially Yom Kippur, his teachings, and it's really an extension of his personality, is something which really had this incredible impact. And I want to share a couple of ideas which I have read and I've heard and I've seen from him. And the way I'm going to put them together is really mine, so we're going to give him all the credit, and I'm going to take all the blame on this. One of the things that he said, which takes place when we sin, is that our whole personalities, in a sense, change. But being a Talmudist, being even more than that, what we can call a brisker, somebody from the brisker derech, from brisk, one of the divisions that he would use to analyze things was something called the gavra and the cheftza. The gavra is a person, an individual, a human being, and a cheftza is an object. Rabbi Soloveitchik said that when a person sins, he changes from a gavra to a cheftza. He changes from a person created in the image of God, endowed with all kinds of spiritual gifts, and it becomes an object, a person who's controlled by instinct, in a certain sense becomes no different from a dog, or for that matter, we can say from, as he once said, from Pavlov's Hund, Pavlov's dog, somebody controlled by instinct. So the question is, who do you want to be? Do we want to be independent human beings who are able to make decisions? Or do you want to be somebody who's controlled by our environment, who instincts determine what we do, what our decisions are, and who we ultimately are going to be? That's part one. Part two is that every single human being over here, because we're created in the image of God, is here on, to quote some very famous actors, or famous scene from movies back in the day, we're all on a mission from God. Each one of us are a shliach, as it were, from God, from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're a shliach, we're messengers, because God created us in His image. And therefore He put us on this earth to do things which are godly. When we get controlled by instinct, we're no longer able to do things. We're no longer a shliach. We become that cheftza, we become that object. Point number three. One of the ways that human beings, and specifically the Jewish people, were endowed with the ability to do something which the angels really couldn't understand. Angels, according to the Midrash, ask God, when is Rosh Hashanah going to be? And God says, the Jews will decide when Rosh Hashanah is. The Jews decide when is Rosh Chodesh. The Jews are the ones who declare time to be holy. That itself is incredibly liberating. One of the things that God gave us is the ability to determine time. We need to remember that God exists outside of time. For God, past, present, and future are all the same. We're the ones who are able to determine time. I want to go back now to Pavlov's Hund, to the dog of Pavlov, the object. Do you think a dog sits around and contemplates, by the way, maybe some dog owners do, contemplates the mistakes it made in the past and plans that it has for the future? I don't believe that that's the case. A dog lives in the present, which ultimately is where the world of sin comes from. It's the individual who values the present over obligations which are born from the past, or over consequences which will take place in the future. Living only in the present is part of being this cheftza, part of being this object, and not being the human being who was handed the ability to understand time. So therefore, the idea of Rosh Chodesh is to sanctify time and declare when the time will be holy. Now, what happens to us when we've sinned, when we've made mistakes? We became objects. We became beings who are controlled by instinct. We still have the ability of looking into the past and retroactively making the past holy by realizing our mistakes, by finding a strategy to elevate things that we've done in the past towards the service of God, which means our ability to make time holy even in the past is ultimately what the secret of tshuva is about. Human beings, we are not objects, we're people. We're not just people, we're in the image of God. Being in the image of God, we have a concept of time. We're able to declare the future time to be holy, but we're even able to take the time in the past and make that holy. And when we do that, we become forgiven from our sins, we become elevated, and we become sanctified. May everybody have a Gemar Chatima Tova.